All right, welcome to Social Bee Designs. This is going to be a fun sew along and tutorial. I'm Jamie, and I am the Social Bee. So I create patterns that are fun, that are useful, that my family needs. So years ago, I created a pattern without really knowing I even created a pattern. My husband is a pipe fitter welder, and they wear a special cap underneath their hard hat, so or welding cap, molding hood, or whatever. And if you have a special welder in your life, you know that they are finicky when it comes to their welding caps. So I created the perfect cap for my husband, and it was a 6-panel cap. Well, I'm going to tell you, I've shared this pattern before, and it is difficult to size. I have it down perfectly, but I made several muslins for my husband before that happened. And so I thought, you know what? There's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way for people just starting out to be able to make welding caps. And I got it for you. Okay, so let's look and see what's available out there. This is the cap pattern that I made for my husband, and I'm going to show you one because he takes them as fast as I can create them. As fast as I can sew them, he grabs them. So this is his favorite one, and I even put some embroidery on here for his name, but this one has seen better days. It's falling apart. It's at least 10 years old. And this is the 6-panel. So you have the front and the back, the sides. So there's 2 sides and a front and a back. Okay. So 6 panels, and then the brim. Well, when you're sewing this together, unless you really know your machine or you have the slightest needle adjustment, it can be tricky, to say the least. Because every time you adjust a seam, it adjusts it by 6 times 2, right? Because each panel is being adjusted on either side with that adjustment of the needle. So that gets tricky. My pattern is amazing. You never have to deal, when you have a 6-panel hat, you never deal with cone head, which is why he loved these. Okay? So there's definitely some value to a 6-panel cap, but ease of sewing is not going to be one of them. They're easy to sew, but they don't always fit the right way. And the other thing about my patterns specifically and uniquely is that there is no band. And you can see how worn this one is. This would be the front, okay? Because or the side, depending on when they're welding, because the brim protects your ear from sparks. Okay, so this is worn for between 8 and 12 hours a shift, and sometimes when you're pulling really long hours, even more. This is a hat that he bought years ago, and I'm going to show you why this one's not going to work as well. For one, they did not cut it on the cross of grain, okay? They cut it with the selvage. That makes it not stretch at all. And you can see he's hardly worn it. Also, there's, and most of the ones that you buy in the store, because they're easier to create, have a band. You see this band? Well, this band, there's no stretch to it at all. And it has 2 rows of stitching. So there's no give, and that leaves marks on their head and headaches. So a lot of, this is what you usually get out in the marketplace, but it is an inferior cap. And then the fabric doesn't feel wonderful. You know, you want, like, if you could feel this, it's so worn, it feels like silk now because it was a really nice high quality cotton. You want that. The other thing is and it's lined. It's lined with the same soft cotton that you made the outside with. Okay, now here's what you get in the stores. This is a 6-panel cap as well. Again with the band, absolutely no stretch. And then the bill has some sort of cardboard in there. And it's not flexible at all. There's no lining. There's no lining. And again, you can see that he wore this a little bit on the road, but it was so tight that it didn't work out well. So here is our new 4-panel welding cap, and I'm going to show it to you on my stand first. It's got a little bit longer bill. You can adjust that if your welder does not like a little bit longer bill. Mine does. It protects the ear and the top part of your neck. So in other words, the sparks are not going down into your shirt. Burns. It's perfect up here. There's no cone head shape. This will be the front, or the, depending on how your welder wears it. And then, of course, it flips up when it's not being used. Okay? So this, let me take it off the stand for you. This is the 4-panel. Okay? And this is the 6-panel. They have the identical shape that I was able to create with 4 panels versus 6. So what does that mean? It means you're going to be able to adjust it easier. It means that you're going to sew them twice, if not 3 times as fast. And it means that I was able to standardize some sizing for you. So that means less muslins for you to make. Now, my standardized sizing goes from a head circumference, which is measuring around your head with a soft tape measure, such as this. Okay? You're going to want to get an accurate measurement. Do not pull it tight. You're going to skew your measurements off. But it goes from a standard size head circumference of 22 all the way to 25. Okay? And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that with two pattern pieces, one for the panel and one for the brim. And you're going to be making all of the standard sizes. Okay? Now, if your fitter is extra picky, you can do a muslin, but make sure you use the same kind of quality fabric that you would use in the welding cap. So let's go over to our pressing station and ironing board and look and see what we have over there. And I will show you the pieces. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So here we are. We have your welding cap. This is the panel. You need to cut 4 of each. 4 of your outer fabric and 4 of your lining. And technically, this is a reversible hat. I usually don't do it that way. My husband likes it one direction, but it is reversible. And then you have the brim, and you're going to cut 1 of each. An outer fabric, a lining, and a cotton batting or wool. Don't use any polyester. Okay, you're going to need a few supplies, a nice sharp pair of scissors, a nice rotary cutter. That's how I cut my pattern pieces out. You can just use scissors if you want, and then thread snips. The luxury items I'm going to be using is, let's see, I have a very nice Aliso steam iron, right? It's got a good amount of steam in there. So I like Mary Ellen's Best Press because it gives the hat some firmness while I'm sewing it. I always use clappers, and I get these from Cheryl Avery and at Buck Rocks Diamond Wheel Sharpening. I use the small clapper specifically for the hat. And then this, if you're going to be sewing very many of these, you are going to want to invest in this. You can see I've had mine for years. It's a sewing ham. And a sewing ham is going to get your, let me get a cap here. It's going to help you get those seams pressed out beautifully. Okay? So we are going to go and hit the sewing machine and start stitching. All right. Here we are. We've got our pattern pieces. Okay. I always start with stitching the brim. And how you are going to layer this is your fabrics are going to be right side together. And I have a piece of wool batting in there. I love using wool for these welding caps because wool is a natural fire, has a natural fire resistant property to it. So this is 100% wool batting. Okay. Always matching thread. I happen to have a blue in here. It kind of matches my lining. I would have normally gone with red or black. I'm out of red and black. That seems crazy, but I did not have any. So here we go. In fact, I'm gonna sew on. I prefer to get this a little more lined up, but I prefer to sew on the fabric versus on the batting. The batting tends to get stuck in my foot a little bit. And in the pattern, I tell you the exact seam allowance to get the exact size standard hat you want. Well, in order to do that, you need to know where your machine stitches. So what I did is I just took a piece of paper and I used my right, left, and center needle position with my B foot. So I marked that I'm sewing on my HV Ruby. I'm using my B foot, and my left needle position is a 1/2 inch, and that's what I need for my husband's hat or cap. So if you need a scant 1/4 inch, you use the right position. The middle is in between these two, so that would give you another size. But for my husband, I need a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And that's not going to matter too much on the brim, but it's definitely going to matter when we're sewing our cap. So really just for the brim, I'm going to use a center seam allowance because that's just what I like. And I use the edge of my presser foot. And I really like using the edge no matter what. That's why I'd rather move the needle and always run my fabric along the edge because it's easier to line up. Just back stitch always. And I have a little bit bigger needle in here than I would normally use, but I was almost thinking about putting the outside of this in denim. So it's up to you. If you use a denim though, you're going to want to make sure that it's 100% cotton. You don't want any stretch or spandex in that. Okay. And then we left the scissors. We'll go over to the pressing table and I'll show you what we do over here. So I'm going to set my seam, and if you press as you go, you're going to end up with a lot nicer finished product. Now you can finish the edges of these 2 different ways. You can pink it all the way around, or you can just use some scissors and snip along the curve, but do not snip through the thread, or you're going to be ripping and resewing. And if you snip too far, you might be recutting. So, and you do not, if you watch any of my other videos, you do not want to rush. These are all fitted products, like the slippers. And if you want that beautiful fit and that nice finish, you just do not rush it. And then you turn it inside out. And if it doesn't look as turned and beautiful as you would like, you can push it out a little bit if you have one of your everything tools. Those are made by my friend Buck over at Buck Rocks as well. And they really do make a difference in your end products. And then you get a little steam in there, and it makes your fabric a little more flexible, and you can roll it a little bit with your fingers until it looks perfect to you. And once it looks perfect to you, grab your clapper, and I'm going to use both actually. I can cover my whole area. And there, that is beautiful. So we'll go back over and stitch that down, do a little top stitching here. Okay, little top stitching, and you can run zigzags, you can run straight stitches. I think I'm just gonna I'm gonna run a straight stitch on this because, like I said, I am using blue thread, so it'll just kind of look, I guess it's kind of fitting for today. Today's a voting day where I'm at right now, so get some primaries going. Little red, white, and blue. And then I like to do a few lines of quilting here. Let's see which way can... Yeah, I guess I'll go that way. And I'll move my needle position a little bit. And if you take your time, it'll look really nice and neat at the end. And again, the quilting and stitching at the end, I say stitching, I say quilting, my husband says stitching because he told me he didn't need a quilted hat. Not really knowing, I guess, what that meant. And we'll do one more line. And then we'll set it aside. So for mine, these are 1/2 inch apart because, like I said, I already did the measurements. And we know my left needle position is 1/2 inch from the side of my foot. So there we go. Isn't that pretty? There we go. Okay, so we're going to set that aside. When we go back over to the ironing station, we'll press it one more time. We're going to start sewing our cap together. And I'm going to show you a little trick. If you take your fabric and you fold it accordion style back and forth, when you cut this out with your rotary cutter, it will automatically be in 2 sets. So there's a little tip for you, and then you just have to adjust it just a little bit with your fingers. And we're going to do our 1/2 inch. Like I said, this is what fits my husband, and you definitely want to secure both edges. Your starting point and your stopping point. And if you have the fix option on your machine, use it. I like it. It really secures those stitches. I do a little back tack and I do a little fixing. And keep the fabric lining up and running right along the edge. I didn't mention this before, but another great trick is, or tip, would be to press your fabric before you cut it out and pre-wash it, because these are going to get washed a lot. I pre-wash in hot water. And also pay attention, obviously, if your fabric is like mine and it's directional, with the brim as well, because your brim is going to be down. You want the direction of your fabric to be going the right way. You don't want it to be upside down. Okay, we're going to go press, and I'm going to show you how to use the pressing ham. First we'll press our bill. You can see when I'm pressing, I'm going right over the wool batting, and it's not melted and all. That's exactly what you want from a batting inside a welding cap. Alright, let me make sure you're perfectly in frame. Okay, so I start out, and I've got my little clapper next to me, and I just open this up, and you do it in stages. So now you can see it's flat from being pressed, but let me show you what exactly that clapper does. The clapper absorbs the heat and smooths that seam, and it holds it down. And then you adjust your hat along the edge of your ham and press the next curve. And use your clapper and smooth that down. See? Creates a really nice open seam. And this is kind of a big seam allowance. Get your hands out of the way before you use the steam. Look at, isn't that nice? Okay, so there's that one, and you can see how beautifully that lays on the inside. We're going to go to our next one. I'm going to start by pressing the top. You want that top really flat, because you're going to meet the two up. And if you're not pressing as you go, you might end up, even with my amazing design, you might end up with cone heads. So you definitely want to press as you go. You want to be as accurate in cutting out as you can possibly be. And you want to take your time. So it's a little tedious to get all the pressing in here. And I think if I had a better ham and it wasn't, my ham's good, but if my holder wasn't so old, it might not be quite as bad, but okay. So we have that, and we are going to go back and put these pieces together. Alright, so we're back over to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna show you some of the most important parts here. One, you want to take your two seams and you want to line them up. Not haphazardly, but very, very well. Because the nicer that those are lined up, the nicer your finished cap is going to look. And I don't, and this is personal preference, but I do not trim these seam allowances. I found that they might not look as pretty inside. It won't matter because they are lined. But by not trimming the seam allowances, there's more room for repair when if it does rip, or there's more room for repair. And I actually had less repairs with a larger seam allowance. So I tend not to trim. And since you're on the bias at that point, I also don't feel the need to clip into my, with my ham at least, I don't feel the need to clip into my curves, because if you can tell, that is already laying beautifully. So I don't need to. Okay, so I pin the middle right where the seam is at, and then I jump to the bottom and I put a pin in the bottom. Then I jump to the other side and I put a pin in the other side. Okay, at the bottom. And then what I do is I fill in the ease, because this is all going to be a curved bias type seam. It's all in a curve. And then come to the other side, get it all lined up. It'll fill in perfectly because, like I said, I've worked for 2 years on this 4-patch pattern. Okay, so there, that's what you want it to look like. A double pin on either side to really hold that seam together, and then we're just gonna go for it using the same seam allowance that you figured out you needed in your pattern. I've got a, I'm going to rethread my machine here real quick. I've got a knot in my thread, so that, if you hear that funny noise, that's what that was. A knot in this. Yeah, there's some kind of funny knot in that thread, so I'm going to just take the end off where it was at and rethread. Like I said, I do my sew alongs. I'm not going to edit any of this out because these are all issues that we all have when sewing, and I prefer to be live. And normally I'd have there we go. Normally I would have a piece of scrap fabric here, but I don't have any sitting here, so. We all need to know what to do when we run into a problem, and not everything is going to ever be perfect. So as we fix this little problem, I don't like extra stitches in there that don't need to be, and we just take that thread out. Okay. You go slowly along your seam. And I do like to back stitch along the seam at the top. It will not only help me get a beautiful press on there, but it will also secure those extra stitches where they meet. Okay, let's take a peek. All right, I am so excited. We're gonna take a peek and look at that. Do you guys see that? Do you guys see where those seams meet right here? It's perfect. That's exactly what you want to see. So we're gonna go press this out and do our lining. Okay. I like to press again right at the top first, especially since we already took a little sneak peek and we found that that top is perfect. And if I can sew with a camera over my head, trying to talk and explain what I'm doing while I'm sewing this, you guys are going to have it made. It's a super fun, easy project, and you're going to be able to easily size it for anybody's head. Flip it around and do our other side. You guys are making these, share in the comments and show me what you're making and how your welder liked your homemade, hand-stitched, beautiful hat. And I'm going to go up and I'm going to press the middle one more time and let it just really absorb the heat into that clapper. We're going to take our hat and our bill and we are going to go back to the machine. I've got a lining prepared for you, and I did it in the blue, but you do your lining the exact same way, and you can see. And this is kind of funny too, because I like using really high quality fabrics on these welding caps. And I picked up this fabric at a quilt shop, which is a great place to buy quilt or nice heavy quality soft cotton fabric. Well, I don't remember what brand this is, but so we always have this debate between Joann's and the quilt shop. Look at how thin it turned out after I washed it. So I was a little disappointed. Now this is a really nice cotton that I picked up at Joann's in their novelty section. It's very soft and thick, and it washed up beautifully with very, very minimal fading. So really doesn't matter where you get your fabric. Alright, so what we do is I like to baste on my bill before I do any kind of anything else, actually, before I do any more assembly. And what I'll do is I'll take, because all four panels are exactly the same, what I'm going to do is take one panel and I'm going to measure measure and put the seams together. Okay. And then right here, I'm just going to stick a clip right in the center of that. So now that's the center of one of the panels. And then I'm going to do the same with, and actually, when you turn this, when I turned it, I have a little more batting showing here than I want. I'd like it lined up a little bit better. So I'm just going to trim that batting out of the way. And then I'm going to fold this in half, and here's my center point of my bill. Okay, and what you do is you put right sides together. Make sure I got it centered. Okay. And then, centered without being distorted or folded, I know. Okay. So then I'm just going to line up my piece here, and it does curve around, so you're going to want to take that into account and keep that ease going. Don't be chintzy with it. Don't stretch it. Just walk it along with your fingers and line it up nicely. When you stretch and pull, especially sewing something that you are going to be wearing, it's never going to turn out quite right. Okay, so this is just going to baste it in place. I'm going to put my needle position all the way to the right, so then I know that I'm catching it, but I'm not, and you don't have to shorten the position or the stitch length, because you're going to go back over it anyways, and you just don't want it to be seen. Okay, you don't want the 2 rows of stitching to be seen. It's really just enough to tack it down. Make sure you adjust your hat as you're going. Okay. That's going to hold it there for me. Okay, and then I'm going to clip my threads because we don't want these to be seen as we're finishing here. And then what I do, so now I have this is the right side. We're going to put the right side of this over top of it. And we're going to line up all of our seams. Okay. Just go through the whole hat and line up the seams. And it's a little time consuming, but take your time. You're not in a indie race here. You are making a cap that your welder is going to be wearing day in and day out. So you want to make it comfortable, and you never want to rush on finishing details. And this is a finishing detail, guys. Okay? So get all your pieces lined up, and then go back and put a little bit, a few more pins or clips. It doesn't matter what you use. And like I said, this blue fabric feels a little thin to me. I'm not a huge fan of it, honestly. But I have to see if I can find a selvage so I know what kind not to get. I did like the marbly look. Okay. So, what you do, let's see, maybe this. Okay. Get a little. Okay. I did not see, I rushed a little bit and I did not smooth the area down, but if you can see, it fits together perfectly. You know, if you take your time and your seam allowances all match, it fits together very nicely. And what we want to do is we want to leave a hole where the bill is at for turning. So I'm going to move this pin over, and I'm going to I'm going to start here. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to move my seam allowance. And I usually run it right against the edge, but I'm going to move it over just a tad because that's where I like it. And I have my needle in the middle position. So it's just under a 1/2 inch. I guess if you were in the quilting world, you would call that a scant 1/2 inch. Take your pins out. Don't sew over your pins. You could throw off the timing to your machine. You could break a needle. You could poke your eye out. So many terrible things. Do not ever sew over your pins. I'll tell you, even with a Microtex needle, because it's a 14, a little bit bigger needle, and that's what I usually construct these hats with because I am going through several layers. It does not like that blue fabric at all. It's got a very weird weave to it. So if your machine sounds weird at different times, don't look at just your machine or just the needles. Look at the fabric you're using. Some machines are just not gonna, like my machine just does not like that weird weave. I don't know if it's a sizing thing that they put in the fabric or what, but it's not good. Okay, I'm at the edge of my bill and I'm gonna back tack here. And then I'm gonna come to where my pin was and I'm gonna back tack here too. I'm actually gonna do that a couple times because I'm turning it now. Because really, even though it's circular, it's not a curved seam. It feels curved while you're sewing it, but it's not technically a curved seam. So I am not going to be clipping, and I'm not going to trim my seam allowances there. I want those seam allowances in there. So this is going to take a little finagling, but what you do is you reach in and you start pulling the cap out. Like I said, you're going to be working at it for a few minutes here. Don't rush it. You're going to pop seams. Bill. Okay. Yeah. By doing it this way, look at how beautiful that is, right? You don't have, because you tacked your seam onto, you tacked your bill onto your red outer fabric, so your hole is inside on that second one, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So we're going to go over and I'm going to show you how I like to press this. We don't need our ham, but I start out by pulling it apart a little bit and getting my fingers in there, and I roll it back and forth in my fingers, okay? And then I press. I go to the next section. Look at, do you guys see how beautiful those seams are lined up? That's what you're looking for. And if you find your seams are not I have the clappers, and they really help keep my seams beautiful. But if you don't, use some Mary Ellen's Best Press, but because nothing helps a seam to iron out better than a little starch. Look at, there's our next one. See those seams lined up? You know you did some nice sewing when all your seams start lining up beautifully. And it really does help your end project look. And I'll tell you, better than the professionals. I'll show you a close-up of one of the hats bought from a welding shop. And this pattern's so easy, you could whip these out several a day if you wanted to make a little extra money. Everybody I know is always looking, especially the guys that don't have a wife or know anybody that sews. They really appreciate some sewing, and they will pay good money for some top quality hats, because like I said, they are near impossible to find. So here's our seam. Here's where we stopped and started. Okay, and what I do is I just fold this in a little bit, and I'm going to trim these threads just so you could see where it was at. So we left those. So I'm going to fold that in, and I'm going to iron that nice and flat. Okay, see how that looks? Really nice. Now, in fact, I'm even going to stick a pin here so you can tell right where it was at. Here's where our start and stop point is, okay? There's a little thread that needs to be trimmed. And then, I didn't like that so much. I like to press that a little bit better in the corner. Let me check my other corner. Yeah. And so you just roll it a little bit, and then it looks really nice when your welder's wearing it. Okay, so we're going to go back over and we're going to do our final little stitching on here, okay? I don't think that got pressed very good right here. I'm not going to rush. There. So this will be the front where your welder's wearing it, or this will be the front. Okay, depends on how they like to wear their bill. But look at how perfect that top is. There's not a cone head there. No, sir. All right, let's go do our final stitching and see what we got. So how I like to finish it, and you can finish it in lots of different ways. You can do, on this, they did a straight stitch, but look at that stitching. Isn't that funny? These are professionally made, and they didn't pay any mind to that. Also, the seams aren't meeting. So this actually, I don't know if you can see, but this one actually does create a cone type head when it's on, because it's kind of stiff fabric for one, and these seams are so thick because they're double stitched and then they don't meet up perfectly, so it does create that cone head type look to it. You can see right here. So ours does not do that. And what we want to do is, I like to start from the edge, especially since I've got, I think I'll run it in the middle, and I'm going to run it right along here. Especially since the, yeah, okay, I lost my train of thought, but I think I'm going to run it, oh yeah, especially since I'm using a blue, which is not what I would normally use, but looks like I need to take a little trip to the sewing shop. You just keep moving it around as you go. And you want that. Here's where you're going through a lot of layers with that bill in there. Okay. Now I'm going to back tack here. And then I'm going to cut my thread. And this is just my husband's personal preference. So I've got the one line of stitching around here. And I did that relatively close because it closes our, see, it closes our edge up. But what I'm going to run around the outside is going to be a wider stitch. Or not a wider stitch, but a wider seam allowance. And I'm going to back tack again. And again, this is personal preference, and your welder may like something completely different. And if I come to any areas where I'm seeing the blue and I don't want to, then I'm going to stop and use my fingers and roll that out of the way. But so far, so good. You keep it lying flat as you go. And this keeps all your layers together nicely. And then we're going to back stitch here. Cut that. And then what I like to do, see, isn't that nice? Because that will lay perfectly on his head. See that? And I'll give it one more press. Because it's done. But what I like to do is my last finishing touch is the corner here. I take a pin, or the intersection, I guess you'd call it, and then I turn it inside out, and I take my pin and I find the perfect intersection of the next one. You can see that they all met very nicely. Okay, so now you know that these are perfectly matched right now. Okay, take your pin out, hold it tight with your fingers. Okay, actually get it underneath your machine as you're holding it with your pin and your finger. And just, I need to put my needle position and get your needle right down in the middle. And just fix that. If you have a fixing stitch, otherwise just stitch in place for a second. And you don't really see it. You trim those threads. But when you wash it over and over and over and over again, it's really nice to hold those. You'll really appreciate having those pieces held in place. So you can see your middle is just as nice as your middle. Okay? And you just fluff it out. And there you go. You've got your new welding cap. Anyways, there you go. All right, let's see. All right, what do you guys think? Do you guys like that welding cap? You throw it back on my little stand here. Isn't that cute? So, if you are interested in making these up, and look at, see how nice it lays on your head too? It's perfect. So, if you guys are interested in making these up, or if you've made some with my pattern, share them at our Facebook page, The Sewing Bee. And let's see, let me show you. We call this one Welding Hat Cap 4.0. 4.0, why? 4-patch. All right, you guys, have a good day and happy sewing.